When she handed back my promise ring, she smiled kindly and said, "You'll thank me someday for not wasting your best years." I thought about those words every morning, until the day she unexpectedly heard two complete strangers debating which of my companies would expand overseas first. She dropped the ring into my palm like it was something she'd found on the sidewalk. Not thrown, not slammed down. Placed, carefully, the way you'd hand someone their keys back after borrowing their car. "You'll thank me someday," Claire said, "for not wasting your best years." She said it kindly. That's the part one couldn't get past for a long time. She wasn't cruel about it. She smiled a little, the same smile she used when she told baristas to keep the change, and then she picked up her tote bag from the back of the kitchen chair and walked out of the apartment on Providence Road like she was heading to a dentist appointment she didn't want to be late for. I stood there holding a ring that had cost me 4 months of overtime pay, and I thought, this is the part where I'm supposed to feel something enormous. Some earthquake. Instead, I just felt tired, the specific kind of tired that comes from being told, politely, that you were never quite enough to bet on. I put the ring in the drawer of my nightstand, next to a phone charger and a half-empty pack of gum, and I went to work the next morning like nothing had happened, because in Charlotte, nothing dramatic ever really looks like it happened. You just go to your desk. You answer emails. You tell your coworker Priya that everything's fine when she asks if you're feeling okay, because your tie is crooked and you forgot to shave. I thought about those words most mornings for almost 2 years. Not every morning, but most. And then, on a Tuesday in October, in a hotel lobby 300 miles from where she'd said them, Claire was standing near a coffee cart, waiting for someone else entirely, when 2 men in suits behind her started arguing. Genuinely arguing, like it mattered to them personally, about which of my companies was going to open its first overseas office first. She didn't know I was 14 feet away. I didn't know she was there at all. Not until I heard her voice ask the barista, very quietly, "Sorry, did you say Calloway?" As in Nathan Calloway. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I should back up, because none of that makes sense yet, and it shouldn't. That's not how it felt at the time either. 4 years before the ring, before any of it, I was 28 years old and working logistics scheduling for a mid-size furniture distributor off Independence Boulevard, making $61,000 a year, and Claire Whitfield was the smartest person I'd ever dated, by a wide margin, and she made sure I knew it in small ways that felt like affection at the time. She was finishing her MBA at UNC Charlotte while working full-time in commercial real estate finance, and she had a 5-year plan that she updated on an actual spreadsheet, color-coded, with milestones. I used to think that was charming. I used to think a woman who color-coded her ambition was proof that ambition could look like something other than my father's. Loud, unhappy, always one bad quarter away from yelling at the television. We met at a mutual friend's 4th of July barbecue in Noda, and she made fun of the way I stacked my paper plate. "You're building a structural engineering project over there." And I made fun of the fact that she'd read the entire tax code section on 1031 exchanges for fun, and somehow that turned into 2 years of a relationship that felt, most days, like it was working. We had our version of normal. Sunday mornings at the Charlotte Regional Farmers Market on Yorkmont, her buying too many heirloom tomatoes she wouldn't use before they went soft. Friday nights splitting a $6 bottle of wine and watching whatever true crime documentary Netflix had decided to push on us that week. I knew her coffee order changed depending on how stressed she was. Oat milk latte on good days, plain black coffee, no room, on the days her boss had made her cry in the bathroom and pretend she hadn't. I loved her. I want to be honest about that, because it would be easier to tell this story if I could say I didn't, if I could say some part of me always knew. I didn't. I loved her the uncomplicated way you love someone before you understand what they actually need from you. The first crack showed up on a random Tuesday, 11 months in, over something so small I almost don't want to include it. She'd gotten an offer to interview at a firm in Atlanta, bigger city, bigger ceiling, better trajectory, and I'd said, without really thinking about it, "I don't know, I like it here." She went quiet in a specific way, not sulking, calculating. "You like it here," she repeated. Not a question. "Charlotte's good to us." "Charlotte's good to you," she said, and there was no anger in it, which somehow made it worse. "You have a job you don't love in a city you didn't choose because it's comfortable. That's not the same as it being good." She didn't take the Atlanta job, but something in that conversation stayed lodged somewhere, and I didn't notice it lodge. That's the thing about the small cracks. You don't feel them happen. You just notice, months later, that the wall doesn't look the same. Pressure came the way it usually comes, not as one event, but as a slow accumulation of ordinary Tuesdays. Her mother got sick that winter, nothing life-threatening, but enough surgeries and follow-ups that Claire was driving to Greensboro most weekends, which meant she was tired in a way that made her sharper, not softer. Her firm passed her over for a promotion she'd been promised, informally, by a director who then left for a competitor and took the promise with him. She started working later. I started noticing she'd stopped asking about my day, not out of cruelty, just because there wasn't room left in her for it. I picked up more shifts covering a co-worker's maternity leave, which meant less time together, which she read, correctly, in a way I resented at the time, as me choosing the path of least resistance again. "You didn't even ask for a raise," she said one night, not looking up from her laptop. "You just took on more work for the same money." "It's temporary," I said. "Everything's temporary with you," she said. "Except the parts that should be." I didn't understand what she meant. I understand it now. Somewhere in there, we stopped noticing each other's silences the way we used to. We used to be the kind of couple who could read a mood off each other's shoulders across a room. That winter, I'd come home, and she'd already be 3 drinks into a bottle of wine she wasn't planning to share, working on something on her laptop with her jaw tight. And I'd just go make dinner and not ask, because asking had started to feel like poking something that would only get worse. The distance grew in exactly the way the story Bible would predict if I'd been reading one at the time, which I wasn't, because I was just living it. Fewer questions, shorter answers. Longer stretches of 2 people existing in the same 800 square feet without occupying the same emotional room. The point of no return happened on a Thursday in March, and it wasn't a fight. It was worse than a fight, because a fight at least implies both people are still trying. I'd finally worked up the nerve to tell her I was thinking about leaving the distribution job to start something of my own. A small logistics consulting operation, nothing dramatic, using contacts I'd built over 6 years of scheduling freight for companies that didn't know how badly they were bleeding money on inefficient routing. I'd done the math. I had 4 small clients already lined up, informally, guys I'd helped for free who'd said they'd pay for it if I ever went out on my own. I told her over dinner, expecting, I don't know what I was expecting. Enthusiasm, maybe, or at least curiosity. She put her fork down. "Nathan," she said, "I need you to actually think about what you're asking me to do here. You want me to be with someone who's giving up a steady paycheck to chase something that might not work at 29, while I'm trying to build an actual career. It's not chasing anything. I've done the math. You've done the math on a spreadsheet you built in one weekend. I do math for a living." She wasn't yelling. That was the thing. Her voice stayed level the entire time, which somehow made every word land harder. "I can't keep betting my future on whatever this is. Your dreams. I've been doing that for 2 years and I don't have anything to show for it except a mother in a hospital and a job that passed me over. That's not fair. None of that is because of me." "I didn't say it was because of you," she said. "I said I can't do it anymore." We didn't break up that night. That's the strange part. We finished dinner. We watched half an episode of something neither of us was paying attention to. We went to bed on opposite sides of the mattress, further apart than the mattress actually required. But something had already ended. We both knew it. We just hadn't said the sentence yet. She said the sentence 3 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, in the apartment on Providence Road, with the ring. I keep coming back to how kind she was about it. I think that's what took me the longest to process. That I'd built, somewhere in my head, an image of the person who leaves you as someone cruel, someone who owes you an apology they'll never give. Claire wasn't cruel. Claire was certain. She'd made a decision the way she made every decision, with a clear-eyed practicality that left no room for negotiation, and she communicated it to me the same way she'd communicate a project timeline change to a client, regretfully, but without hesitation. "I'm not doing this because I stopped loving you," she said, standing by the door with her tote bag already over her shoulder, like she'd rehearsed the exit before she rehearsed the words. "I'm doing this because I know exactly what my life needs to look like in 5 years, and I don't think staying here, with you, gets me there. I think you're a good man. I think you'll figure out what you want eventually. I just can't wait around while you do. You'll thank me someday," she said, "for not wasting your best years." And then she left, and the door didn't even slam. It clicked shut, quiet and final, the way a nice hotel door closes. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. I don't remember how long. I remember the refrigerator humming. I remember noticing her toothbrush was still in the holder in the bathroom, and I didn't touch it for 6 days, like leaving it there kept some version of the apartment intact. The weeks after are mostly a blur of ordinary things done badly. I forgot to pay a parking ticket, and it turned into a bigger fine. I ate cereal for dinner more nights than I'd like to admit. I went to work and did my job competently enough that nobody asked questions, which is its own kind of quiet grief, being functional enough that no one checks on you. My friend Marcus, who I'd known since community college, was the one who eventually sat me down at a bar off South Boulevard and told me, without much softness, "You've been talking about this consulting thing for 2 years. She's gone now. There's nothing left to lose by trying." That's not exactly comforting. It's not supposed to be comforting, Marcus said. It's supposed to be true. I didn't start the business out of spite. I want to be clear about that, because it would be a better story if I had, if this were about proving her wrong. It wasn't. I started it because I didn't know what else to do with the hours I used to spend being someone's boyfriend, and because Marcus was right that there was nothing left to protect by staying comfortable. I named it Qley Freight Solutions, which sounds bigger than it was. For the first 4 months, it was me, a laptop, and a spreadsheet at my kitchen table, cold calling small manufacturing outfits around the Charlotte metro and telling them I could save them money on their shipping routes if they gave me 30 days to prove it. The first client was a guy named Roy who ran a small furniture stain and finish supplier out of Concord. I saved him about $11,000 a year by consolidating 2 of his shipping lanes. He paid me $1,500 for 3 weeks of work, and I remember sitting in my car in his parking lot afterward, not celebrating exactly, just sitting there feeling like something had clicked into place for the first time in months. The first real success came about 7 months in, when word of mouth got me a contract with a regional building supply company that needed their entire distribution network remapped. It wasn't glamorous. I spent 3 weeks driving to warehouses in Gastonia and Rock Hill, walking loading docks with a clipboard, talking to drivers who knew more about the actual problems than any of the executives did. But it worked. I cut their delivery windows by almost a full day on average, and the owner, a blunt man named Gerald Whitmore, who didn't waste words, told me over a handshake, "You just paid for yourself 6 times over. Send me your rate card. I've got 2 buddies who need this exact thing." That was the moment the business stopped being a thing I was doing to survive and started being a thing that might actually work. I moved out of the 1-bedroom on Providence and into a slightly bigger place near South End, which felt less like an upgrade and more like putting distance between myself and the version of me that used to live there. I started running again, which I hadn't done in 2 years, mostly because it gave me somewhere to put the restlessness that used to just sit in my chest at night. The setback came about 10 months in, and it came the way setbacks usually do, quietly, disguised as bad luck. I'd taken on a contract with a mid-size electronics distributor, my biggest client yet, and 6 weeks into the engagement, the company's ownership changed hands in an acquisition, and the new leadership canceled every outside consulting contract in a single afternoon to consolidate costs. It was almost 40% of my projected revenue for the year, gone in one email. I remember calling Marcus that night, more rattled than I let myself sound. I might have overextended, I told him. I hired a part-time contractor last month based on that contract. So unhire her, or find her something else to do, Marcus said. This isn't the end of anything. This is just the part where you find out if you actually want this. I didn't want it. I let the contractor go with 2 weeks severance I couldn't really afford, apologized to her honestly, and spent the next 3 months rebuilding, slower and more carefully than before. I stopped chasing every client and started being selective about who I worked with, which, counterintuitively, made the business stronger. Real growth, the kind that actually changes a person, doesn't announce itself. It shows up as small, boring habits. I started saying no to clients who wanted quick fixes instead of real solutions. I started reading contracts before signing them instead of trusting my gut. I started going to a Tuesday night rec basketball league at a gym off Park Road, not because I was any good, but because it got me around people who didn't know anything about the business or Claire or any of it. People who just knew me as the guy who couldn't hit a three-pointer to save his life. Around the 18-month mark, I brought on my first full-time hire, a sharp logistics analyst named Priya, different Priya than the one from the furniture company, this one referred by Gerald Whitmore, and having someone else depend on the business for their livelihood changed something in how seriously I took every decision. By year 2, Qley Freight Solutions had grown into something that needed an actual office, a converted warehouse space off Freedom Drive, 6 employees, and a client roster that included 2 regional distributors and, eventually, a contract with a growing specialty foods importer who needed help streamlining shipments coming through the port of Charleston. That importer contract is the one that changed everything, because the owner, a woman named Denise Ferrer, mentioned offhand one afternoon that she was looking at expanding sourcing relationships into Vietnam and needed someone who understood both freight logistics and the operational side of standing up an overseas supply chain. I didn't know anything about international logistics. I told her that honestly. "I don't need you to know it yet," Denise said. "I need you to be the kind of person who learns it fast and doesn't panic when the first shipment gets held up in customs for no reason anyone can explain." I spent the next 4 months teaching myself everything I could about international freight forwarding, customs brokerage, and the absolute chaos of cross-border logistics, mostly at night, mostly with a legal pad covered in questions I emailed to a customs broker in Wilmington who was patient enough to answer them. It worked. Denise's first Vietnam shipment came through 11 days ahead of her worst-case estimate, and within 6 months, Qley Freight Solutions had a second division focused specifically on international logistics consulting for midsize importers, something almost nobody in the Charlotte market was doing at our size. That was the year the business stopped being something I built to fill the silence Claire left behind and started being something I was genuinely proud of, independent of her, independent of anyone. I want to be honest about something here, because the story Bible in my head, the one Marcus kept quoting at me during our Tuesday basketball nights, half joking, half serious, would say I'm not allowed to skip this part. I didn't spend those 2 years thinking about revenge. I want that to be clear. There were nights, early on, where I imagined some scene where Claire would see everything I'd built and regret every word she'd said. But that fantasy faded faster than I expected it to, replaced by something quieter. I stopped needing her to see it at all. I built the business because it was mine, and somewhere in the second year, I noticed I hadn't checked her social media in months. Not because I was punishing myself for looking, because I genuinely stopped needing to. I dated a little, nothing serious. A woman named Renata I met through a mutual client. 3 months of easy company that ended amicably when she got a job offer in Raleigh, and neither of us pretended it was worth trying long distance. It didn't hurt the way Claire leaving had hurt. It just ended, the way most things end, without drama, and I noticed that too, that I could let something go now without it taking a piece of me with it. By the start of year 3, Qley Freight Solutions had grown into something I genuinely hadn't planned for. Denise Ferrer's business had grown alongside ours, and 2 of her competitors had come to us wanting the same overseas logistics setup. I brought on a partner, a former customs compliance officer named Devin Okafor, and together we split the company into 2 operating divisions: domestic freight consulting, which Devin largely ran, and international supply chain consulting, which had become, somehow, the faster-growing half of what people started calling, informally, the Qley companies, plural, because by then it genuinely was more than one entity on paper, a consulting arm, a small freight brokerage license we'd picked up, and a joint venture with a customs brokerage in Wilmington that Devin had helped us structure. None of it happened overnight. I want to be clear about that too, because the version of this story that would be easy to tell, the version where I get rich in 18 months and show up somewhere in a nice car, isn't what actually happened. It took nearly 3 years of unglamorous work, most of it invisible, most of it boring, to get to the point where 2 men in suits in a hotel lobby would know my name well enough to argue about it. The hotel was the Ballantine, on the south side of Charlotte, and I was there for something almost embarrassingly ordinary, a logistics industry conference, 3 days of panels and vendor booths and mediocre coffee, the kind of thing that had become part of my normal life by then. I was 32 years old. I'd been asked, for the first time, to sit on a panel about mid-size firms expanding into cross-border logistics, alongside 2 people whose names I actually recognized from trade publications, which still felt strange every time it happened. I was standing near the coffee cart before my panel, going over notes on my phone, half listening to 2 men near me, vendors of some kind, from their name badges, one from a software company, one from a freight insurance underwriter, who'd apparently attended my panel description in the conference program and gotten into an actual disagreement about it. "I'm telling you, Qley's the one to watch this year," the taller one said. "They already run point for Ferrer specialty imports out of Vietnam. If they're opening a physical office overseas before their competitors even finish scoping it out, that's the whole ballgame." "Nah, it's going to be the customs brokerage arm that expands first," the other one said. "Wilmington office already has the license. The consulting side's still just people on planes. I wasn't paying close attention, honestly, because hearing strangers discuss the company had stopped feeling remarkable somewhere around the second time it happened, which itself said something about how far the last 3 years had carried me. And then I heard a voice behind them. Quiet, careful, the kind of voice someone uses when they're not sure they should be asking. Sorry, did you say Calloway? As in Nathan Calloway. I knew the voice before I turned around. I'd know it anywhere. The way you know a piece of music you haven't heard in years, but could still hum from memory. Claire was standing there in a gray blazer, a lanyard from a different conference entirely hanging around her neck, holding a paper coffee cup she hadn't taken a sip from. She looked older in the specific way people look older when 3 years have actually happened to them, and not just passed by. Not worse, just realer, the softness of 29 replaced by something more settled. She saw me before I said anything. I watched it land on her face in stages, recognition, then disbelief, then something else I couldn't immediately name. Nathan, she said. Claire. The two vendors, oblivious, kept walking toward the ballroom, still arguing about which office would open first, and neither of us corrected them or explained, and for a second we just stood there in a hotel lobby that smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner, 3 years and one promise ring between us. We didn't have the conversation right then. There wasn't room for it. My panel started in 11 minutes, and she had somewhere to be too. A project finance conference 2 floors up, she explained, which was its own quiet detail, that she'd built the exact life she'd said she needed, the one with a ceiling high enough for her ambition. Can I buy you a coffee after your panel? She asked, and there was something in how carefully she asked it, like she wasn't sure she had the right to. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. We met 2 hours later at a small cafe attached to the hotel, the kind of place with mediocre pastries and good enough coffee that nobody complains. She'd changed out of the blazer into something more casual, and she looked, if I'm honest, nervous in a way I'd never seen her look before. Claire didn't do nervous. Claire did certain. I heard them talking about your companies, she said, before I'd even sat down fully. I didn't put it together right away. Calloway's not exactly an unusual name. And then I heard Vietnam and customs brokerage, and something just clicked. It's a lot smaller than it probably sounded in that conversation, I said, which was true, and also the kind of thing I'd learned to say to keep people from assuming more than was real. They were arguing about which division would open a physical overseas office first, she said. That's not small, Nathan. That's not a guy scheduling freight routes out of a kitchen table anymore. No, I said. It's not. She was quiet for a second, turning her coffee cup slowly on the table, not drinking it. The same habit I remembered from 3 years earlier when she was working up to something she didn't know how to say plainly. I think about what I said to you a lot, she said finally. Not in the way you probably think. I don't regret leaving. I want to say that honestly, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve me pretending I have some big regret speech prepared. She paused, but I think about how I said it. The "you'll thank me someday" part. I've thought about that specific sentence more than almost anything I've ever said to another person. Why? Because it wasn't fair, she said. I made it sound like I was doing you a favor. Like leaving was a gift I was giving you, so you'd go figure yourself out. But that's not actually what happened, is it? I left because I needed something for myself, and I dressed it up as being generous toward you because that was easier to live with than just saying I was scared you'd never change, and I didn't want to find out if I was right. I didn't say anything right away. 3 years earlier, I would have needed her to say that. I would have needed it the way you need water. Sitting across from her now, I noticed, almost with surprise, that I didn't need it anymore. I was glad she said it, but I didn't need it. You weren't wrong that I needed to change something, I said. I just don't think you were right about what, exactly. No, she agreed. I don't think I was either. We talked for almost an hour, longer than either of us probably expected to. She told me about her life in careful, unshowy pieces, a director title now, a condo near Uptown, a relationship she mentioned once, briefly, with someone named Theo who sounded steady in the way she'd once told me I wasn't. Her mother had recovered fully. She still color-coded things, she admitted, laughing a little at herself for the first time in the whole conversation. Some things didn't change. I told her about Calloway Freight Solutions the way you tell someone about something you're proud of but don't need them to be impressed by. The kitchen table, Roy's furniture-stained business, Gerald Whitmore's referrals, the contract that fell through, Devin coming on as a partner, Denise Farrer's shipment from Vietnam landing 11 days early. I didn't perform any of it. I wasn't trying to make her regret anything. I was just telling her the truth of what had happened, the way you'd tell an old friend, which, strangely, was closer to what she felt like across that table than anything else. You built all of that, she said, not quite a question. I built it because I didn't know what else to do with the time, I said. Not because I was trying to prove you wrong. I know, she said. That's actually what makes it land harder. If you'd done it out of spite, I think I could have made peace with that a long time ago. But you clearly didn't need me to see any of this. You're just different. Steadier. I can see it in how you're talking about it. You're not performing certainty. You actually have it. I had 3 years to figure it out, I said. You gave me the push. I just didn't know that's what it was at the time. She smiled at that, a real smile, not the kind she'd worn in the kitchen on Providence Road 3 years earlier. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think you were wasting your best years. I think I was scared and I said something cruel that happened to sound wise. I've regretted the sentence more than the decision. I want you to know the difference. I believe you, I said. And I meant it. We didn't exchange numbers. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy to end this story with some implied door left open, some promise of a second chapter neither of us actually wanted. We didn't need one. We finished our coffee, and she stood up first, smoothing her blazer, checking the time on her phone the way she used to before every meeting she'd ever gone to. I should get back, she said. I have a session in 20 minutes. Me too, actually. She hesitated by the table for a second, like there was one more thing she wanted to say and wasn't sure it needed saying. I hope the Vietnam office happens, she said finally. Whichever one it ends up being. Thanks, I said. I hope Theo knows what he's got. She laughed, surprised, and it was the kind of laugh that told me we were actually going to be fine, both of us, separately, in the lives we'd each built without needing the other one to notice. She walked back toward the elevators, and I watched her go, and I didn't feel the ache I'd expected to feel if this moment ever happened. I felt something closer to relief. Like a door I didn't know was still slightly open had finally, quietly, clicked shut, the good kind of shut, the kind that doesn't need slamming to mean something. I flew to Ho Chi Minh City 4 months later to sign the lease on Callaway Freight Solutions' first overseas office, a small 2-room space above a noodle shop that Devin had found through a contact of Denise Ferrer's. It wasn't glamorous. The air conditioning barely worked, and the internet cut out twice during the signing. I still have the promise ring. I never sold it, never threw it away, though I stopped thinking about the words that came with it somewhere around the second year, when the business started meaning more to me than the story I'd been telling myself about who'd wronged whom. Sometimes, driving home from the Freedom Drive office late in the evening, I think about how easy it would have been to spend the rest of my life resenting a sentence someone said to me kindly on a random Sunday afternoon. I think about how close I came to letting that sentence define what I thought I deserved. I don't thank her for leaving, exactly. That's not quite the right word for it. But I understand, now, in a way I couldn't have 3 years ago, that some people leave you a gift by taking something away, not because they meant to, and not because it didn't hurt, but because the space they leave behind is sometimes the only place you'll ever actually grow into who you were supposed to become. I turned the radio on, merged onto 485, and drove home to an apartment that was mine, built by nobody's hands but my own, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.